even the sort of the politicians of Kashmir who were supported India or who were built up by India, like Umar Abdullah, have only last week now, Umar Abdullah, in the Kashmir, the occupied Kashmir Assembly, made a statement that Kashmir was not an integral part of India and it was a dispute between India and Pakistan, which is an enormous shift. And it shows how within Kashmir now there is almost no voice that supports the myth that Kashmir is part of the Indian Union. Why the Indians continue to propagate it is something which one can't comprehend. But the fact of the matter is, it's a lost argument. It really does not hold any water at all. The other issue, of course, is that only the UN SC resolutions will allow the world to establish what the Kashmiris really want. I mean, there's a big debate that the Kashmiris don't want to go to Pakistan, they want azadi, freedom. We don't know because they've not been allowed to exercise their right of self-determination. What we do know, however, is that no Kashmiri wants to remain under Indian occupation. That is the starting point. What the Kashmiris want has to be ascertained through UN resolutions. I am not a spokesperson of a government and have not been of any government. As a Pakistani who has been analyst on strategic issues, I've looked at Kashmir for a long time, and many in Pakistan feel, and this is the Pakistani official stated position also, that we will go with whatever the Kashmiris want. So if the Kashmiris want to be given the third choice in the UN plebiscite, so be it. But the fact of the matter is, Pakistan and India have to be brought together to work out the modalities of the plebiscite. What will be included? That's the next stage. India has to agree to allowing the UN to hold the plebiscite. And it is not an intractable problem, nor is it unique. The East Timor issue was identical, and I've done the research on that, to the Kashmir issue in the UN and how it progressed. So if the East Timor issue of self-determination could be resolved by the United Nations, there is absolutely no reason why a simple issue of giving the Kashmiris their right of self-determination is also not allowed, because we have to remember, Kashmir is not a territorial dispute. It is a dispute about the right of self-determination, which again is very central to the whole new European concept. The idea of self-determination, as far as I know, has been very important in European history, and therefore I think the Europeans should be much more sympathetic to this issue than maybe the Americans. I don't know. The third point that needs to be made is, much has been said, well, India and Pakistan, when they signed the similar agreement, effectively, I'm just going to finish, effectively left out the UN and wanted to resolve it bilaterally. Not correct at all. Anybody who reads the similar agreement, and I don't have time to read it, but I'll refer you to it, Article 1.1, Article 1.2, which is very important because it says that till the issue is resolved, neither side can change the status quo unilaterally. So my argument is, when India took over, altered the line of control in 1984, it took over some heights and so on, and the line of control was redrawn. It effectively undermined and destroyed the similar agreement to begin with. If you look at Article 1(6), it talks about principles of the UN Charter. Article 4.2, which again refers to not altering the line of control. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is also a misperception that somehow Simla removed the UN position on Kashmir. No, it did not at all. It reaffirmed it, and it said that issues should be, even the bilateral relationship must be defined in terms of the UN Charter and the principles of the United Nations. This is right in the preamble of the Simla Agreement. So I'm afraid that is a myth also, that somehow Pakistan abandoned its position on the UN because of the Simla Agreement. Not at all. I've already made the point about Pakistan being an equal party to the dispute, but I want to make another plea. Why should the Kashmiri people suffer because of the sins of omission and commission by the various Pakistani governments relating to Kashmir? Should the Kashmiris be subject continuously to human rights abuses and denial of their right of self-determination because of Pakistan government failures or Pakistan government's questionable policies? That is the issue. Why should the Kashmiris be made to suffer? And for the international community, finally, I think the choice is simply this: ignoring the legitimacy of the Kashmir cause and human rights violations by India to please India and retain access to its large markets. That's what it boils down to. The problem is, unless the international community pushes for the resolution according to UNSC resolutions and the principle of self-determination, there will be continued instability in the region and also growing radicalization of the populations. There is a need to realize there can be no solution to the problem of Kashmir within the Indian constitution or without the participation of the three parties to the dispute: Pakistan, the Kashmiris, and India. Generation after generation is growing up with violence and hatred, denied their normal life, no access to proper education, and the situation is going to get worse because for the first time the Kashmiri women have come out of their homes onto the streets to support the youth. And that is again an expansion, upping of the ante of this freedom struggle against India. That needs to be realized. The role of the women that is going to now be central in the struggle to get rid of Indian occupation. So at the end of it, Pakistan and India relations, whether we like it or not, the parameters of this relationship are defined by Kashmir. Musharraf tried to get away from it, Zardari tried to run away from it, it has not worked. Kashmir brings you back to point zero again. Till the Kashmir issue is resolved, there can be no normalization of relations between a nuclear Pakistan and a nuclear India. But the issue is not simply that it should be resolved because of this. It should be resolved because it's a human rights issue and a basic issue of self-determination of a people. Everywhere in the world, the people have got their right of self-determination. Why are the Kashmiris being denied theirs? And I leave it at that.
Thank you. Barrister.
This was a liberal. I think I'm not always in favour of self-determination for people, so I agree to that. Just two things prompt me. First of all, just you did say in passing, Shirin, that no Kashmiri wants to live under Indian rule, but of course there's the Hindus in Jammu, so it's not quite as clear cut.
But you need to give them the right to show. But there's one point which you mentioned that Pakistani leaders, I mean Pakistan is guilty of many sins, but I want to tell you that Kashmir has never been an electoral issue in domestic Pakistan because there is a consensus on issue. So if you look at the record, no politician in general elections actually talks about Kashmir.
The other point is during the course of the discussion, we've heard many references to United Nations resolution this or that was passed or that was last week. And I'm very conscious of an expression that's been doing the rounds of this Parliament for some reason over the last few weeks, which is attributed to Bismarck, which is the public. There are two things the public should never be allowed to see. One is the making of sausages, and two is the making of laws. Because in both cases it's very messy, unpleasant business. And I've now been in this Parliament for long enough to have some laws that I approved 10 years ago now coming back and being re-looked at. And I think, did I really sign up to that 10 years ago? So some of these things, United Nations resolutions and wording, drawn up by diplomats in the middle of the night. When you look at them 30 years ago, they can't really be held up as tablets of stone. We just have to deal with things as they are. It's my comment. Now, we've heard a lot from, if you like, from one side, Kashmir people's side and the Pakistan side, and so it's my great pleasure to introduce General Mehta.